Blood satellite.
One last thing. I'm good. This is going to lead into the book I wanted to discuss, and this is just I don't know what to make of this yet because it's a developing story. Have you been following what's been going on with the OpenAI organization?
Yes, I have.
The maker of ChatGPT, with billions of dollars in backing from Microsoft, is now in turmoil after the board fired its co-founder and CEO, Sam Altman, on Friday.
Just days after representing the company at a conference, Sam Altman was immediately fired by the board from his position as CEO of OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT. And what happened next can only be described as complete chaos. 2 new CEOs came and went in a matter of days. The employees all signed a letter of revolt. And finally, Sam was confirmed as returning yet again.
So I got 4 articles open here that I think is going to tell the story for people. Because there's some, just as of the day of this recording, some new news drop that I think put the button on this whole thing. So it all involves Sam Altman, who's a name that will be familiar to a lot of people who've been following this scene for a while. I think even Curtis Yarvin wrote a book a long time ago that it was titled something like "Sam Altman is not a blithering idiot," which is I haven't read it, but that sounds passive aggressive, and I like it. But Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, artificial intelligence organizations that's responsible for all of that stuff that everyone's using right now. A few days ago, the news broke that he was being ousted from his position. And here's an article from Ars Technica. The headline is, "Details emerge of surprise board coup that ousted CEO Sam Altman at OpenAI." The OpenAI president and 3 researchers resigned. The COO says there's no malfeasance. So one day, Sam Altman is out, and there's some kind of corporate, no malfeasance, but like a palace intrigue going on, because you don't usually see this happen. For people who don't know, who don't speak corporate horse shit, a CEO leaving should be seen as par for the course. Like, if a CEO is leaving, even if they're being fired, it should look to everyone else like it was decided on 5 years before. Like, the one thing you never want to happen is this happen, unless someone's making a statement or it just is that ugly. Something crazy happened. So the very idea that Sam Altman just is, quote, even if he's saying he's leaving, for him just to not be there one day means that some tectonic shift has occurred, because a company at that level shouldn't have this breaking news occur. So, okay, he left. Here's another article written by, and I don't know why I picked this one, but I did. It's published in the Indian Express. I don't know if you've read the Indian Express before, but the slogan, I guess, for the Indian Express is "Journalism of Courage." So anyway,
You cut out there a little bit. I thought you said journalism of curry.
I wonder if they did that on purpose. They could actually edit that to courage.
Courage, yeah.
So,
Yes.
Headline here: OpenAI's ex-CEO Sam Altman to lead Microsoft's new advanced AI research team. Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, who co-founded OpenAI, will now lead advanced AI research team at Microsoft. So, not long after they were chased out of OpenAI, Microsoft was greeting them with open arms, saying, "Come over here and develop the next best, greatest AI over here with us." That's what happens. Get ready for the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme, because the next look at the New York Times, the next article is, "Sam Altman is reinstated as OpenAI's chief executive." So he, like, the news was that he had signed on at Microsoft. The ink was drying on the contract. Him and a bunch of OpenAI guys, a ton of people, a ton of researchers left in solidarity, and literally a couple days later, he's back as a chief executive. And the subtitle here is, "The move capped a chaotic 5 days at the artificial intelligence company." Sam Altman was reinstated late Tuesday as OpenAI's chief executive, the company said, successfully reversing his ouster by OpenAI's board last week after a campaign waged by his allies, employees, and investors. The company's board of directors will be overhauled, jettisoning several members who had opposed him. Adam D'Angelo, the chief executive of Quora, will be the only holdover. So I guess he comes back. Like I desperately want to know the story behind this. And then here's the last thing that I think gives a bit more context. And this is where we veer into perhaps more conspiratorial territory, but I think it's the far more interesting one. Now I'm looking at the New York Post. Article is open, and this was published on November 22. So today, as of this recording, OpenAI researchers warned board of AI breakthrough ahead of CEO Sam Altman's ouster. Right ahead of him being fired, several staff researchers sent the board of directors a letter warning of a powerful artificial intelligence discovery that they said could threaten humanity. Two people familiar with the matter told Reuters. Now, this is something I had heard, and I'm curious if you had heard this too. I had heard that there's two factions at war within OpenAI, because something that Sam Altman and others have remarked on is that the AI is advancing and optimizing at a rate that they had not predicted.
Number one, AI models like GPT-4 can produce synthetic data, meaning they can produce text that then can be used to train other AI models. Now, before there was this question, are we going to run out of high quality human generated data? And the potential solution to that would be to have these AI models provide synthetic data. So provide data, so kind of make up, dream up data to train the next version of models. A lot of people said that would be impossible. There would be these mistakes that kind of cumulatively would corrupt the whole process. Everything would fall apart. That would never work. But here they're saying that GPT-4, for example, can produce better data than humans can for training these other models.
These things are getting so much better and so much smarter and getting access to so much more data. It's leaps and bounds ahead of where they thought they would be. So there's people like Sam Altman who want to go full steam ahead. However, there's this other faction that wants to rein it in a little bit. They want to slow it down because it's getting out of control. And the story I'm hearing was that was the whole thing with the coup, that it was the slow guys who felt like they had to protect humanity by getting this guy out of there. And what we're seeing is how that shakes out. And with him being let back in, maybe that's a sign that they want to go full steam ahead with developing this AI. And all we have is this letter to go off of. Who's to say if it's true or not? But I've heard you can piece together a lot of comments over the past few years from himself saying that, like, look, it's kind of amazing that it's advancing so fast. So I think there is something to that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, probably it was bound to happen eventually. And I couldn't imagine a worse guy to be at the head than the frail, limp-wristed gay Jew gushing on television. It's honestly a nightmare scenario for me.
Yeah, because the question is, like, if there were a nightmare scenario, let's say it is a nightmare scenario, would there be any mechanism or any check or any balance that could conceivably rein it in? Because the story they're trying to tell is that the investors decided that, oh, this is too much power. Why would investors think that? Would investors really want to rein it in?
The investors didn't shut the project down. The investors just got rid of Sam, right? So you have to think for a second, what do the investors know that the public doesn't? And who are the investors, by the way? We know who Sam is. He's a 42-year-old gay Jew. He's a Jew, and he sucks dick. And there's not a whole lot else to know about him other than he's a big fucking nerd, and he loves to cry on TV. And then who are the board? I don't know, but normally corporate boards are composed of older, worldly, educated, experienced men who are there to give guidance where somebody like Sammy Boy might not have the experience. Normally, that's not all boards, but usually that's the whole point to having a board. When the board isn't just the shareholders, that's who the board is. So the fact that now they've lost the board is gone, and now it's just Sam and Sam's friends are the board, that's fucking terrifying. Because now, even more than ever, it really is just Sam Altman at the reins of an epoch changing technology. And I more than ever want to shut down the internet globally and turn off all of the power stations.
Well, and this is kind of what I was trying to get to, which is that this touches on everything. This touches on neurotechnology. This touches on, because there's a lot of people who will like to, scoff at artificial intelligence, like, oh, it's not that, I've tried it out, it's not that impressive. What's it, can it, what they're saying is that the AI can start to address certain mathematical problems that human beings couldn't. That sounds like a very cinematic way of describing it, but it does stand to reason that advanced AI could get there and present you with something unprecedented. And there's a lot of people who just don't believe that will happen. And to those people, I would say it reminds me of people, because I'm old enough to remember the earlier days of the internet, where people are like, oh, so you can send a letter faster? So, email, it's like, it's fast, it's fast mail. Like, who fucking? So, what you think? What you're saying is so important that it must be instantaneous? Like, I've heard this before. I've heard this during the earlier days of the internet, how people just didn't believe it would be a thing. That, like, oh, it'll have its day, but people, like, you don't understand how big AI is. You're not a serious person if you're not looking at this and freaking the fuck out. Like, if you're actually looking at the leaps and bounds that these technologies advance by, while having a public facing aspect to it. And this is what we'll get to in the book in a second, but like the ways that this, like, we're seeing the parlor tricks that I can do. But even the guys who are developing it and are like, this is fucking crazy what we're doing. Like, I'm surprised. I shouldn't be in charge of this. This thing is in charge of it now. Like, you should be thinking about where this can go, because it's not going to go away. It's like the internet. Did the internet go away? It took a while for it to take its final form. Arguably, it hasn't even taken that yet. It's just had so many epoch changes so fast within one generation that with AI, it's advancing. These epochs are even closer and closer together. Like, where AI will be in 5 years might very well blow your mind, might very well terrify you. So all I'm saying is you should be terrified now and think about how they're intending for this to be integrated into your life right now. And all this, like, palace intrigue, inside baseball stuff, that's why I'm paying attention to it. I'm paying attention because, like we had said about just before, about foreign interests, foreign, like, cartels and drug people having interests in the legalization of drugs in these countries. Like, who are these investors at OpenAI, really? Because you say investors and you're kind of hand waving to a bunch of shadowy old white men in a room. It's like, no, are they, like, who are they? Are they like fucking Chinese elites? Like, do you know who these investors are of this private organization and how the governments are integrated into this? Do you actually know? Because there's crazy shit happening right now. And there's Microsoft. Like, you'd think Microsoft would be pissed off about Sam Altman going over to Microsoft, then going back and be like, you know what? It's best for OpenAI. Wait, are you guys not competitors? That's weird to me. It's weird that you guys are supposedly competitors, but you actually seem like you're just walking between rooms.
Isn't Microsoft a major shareholder, though?
That's the thing. Like, how does this fucking shit fit together? Because it doesn't make sense if you look at it from your typical, capitalist economic. Like, these are companies doing things. Like, every company is the same fucking company, and every company has investors from all over the fucking world working on these things with this one guy here. Like, the way this all fits together doesn't make sense to me anymore. That's what I'm going at. But it's going to affect everything. And that will lead into, I guess, the thing I really wanted to talk about, which was this book. This is a bit of a departure from what we were talking about, but I think it integrates well into it as a kind of an extension of what we've been talking about media and communication and whatnot. This is a book that was a compilation of essays. It's called Neurotechnology in National Security and Defense. So this is the more academic, more policy-driven dimension to what we were just talking about. This is people in the government, in the Department of Defense, people warning each other or trying to figure out how to get a leash on this thing called neurotechnology. because I do think artificial intelligence, and this is sort of like the transhumanism thing. This is like we are entering a new type of paradigm for war and global conflict, where we are developing technology that can either be weaponized or employed to impact the human senses and the human cognitive capabilities. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about fucking brain chips. I'm talking about new types of synthetic chemicals that fuck with your mind and make you hallucinate. Basically, the entire point of this book is academics and serious researchers saying, here's where we think all this technology is going.
To revolutionize the world of neurotechnology, large tech companies are launching unprecedented projects. In 2016, Elon Musk, a renowned inventor and founder of Tesla and SpaceX, pioneered Neuralink to design an implantable brain-machine interface. Through minimal invasive surgery, this groundbreaking technology will insert ultra-fine wires, 5 microns in diameter, into one's cerebral cortex for both transmitting and receiving data seamlessly. Established in the same year, Kernel has been able to create a non-invasive brain interface prototype based on near-infrared spectroscopy. Currently, this technology is presented as a helmet device that can identify emotions and other such states of being. Even tech giants like Facebook and Google are jumping into the development of their own neurotechnology projects.
And we need to get a handle on this, because just based on what we're developing right now that some people don't know about, the thing, but there's no such thing as a non-combatant anymore. And the preface to this talk we're going to have was, remember when we were covering we mentioned this earlier in the episode, the Chinese importing of fentanyl into Canada, and how the triads are hooked in with the Chinese Communist Party, and how the proliferation of fentanyl with North America could be perceived as an act of war. Not, your typical boots on the ground hot war, but war in the sense of trying to pacify a population, trying to introduce chemicals that have an effect that make your target or your enemy nation less prone to sovereignty, more amenable to your other machinations and strategies. Like seeing drugs as just another weapon in your arsenal, just like the American government might see color revolutions as a tool in their toolbox to destabilize a country. Think of all the things you can do to destabilize a country. Now, could that be adding chemicals to the water supply? One of the things they talk about in this book is like, can we actually just start putting MDMA in the water? You know what I mean? Like, can we make an aerosol of MDMA to drop over fucking, to neutralize an actual firefight situation, And they're saying, well, why the fuck not, And this is just an advancement. And people might remember many, many episodes ago, we were talking about, I think it was the book Lab 257. It was the talk about basically all the CIA's development of chemical weapons, and everything from like the accidental creation of Lyme disease, or any chemical that they could create that could neutralize an opponent without killing them. And of course, there's all kinds of horrific biological side effects to that. But in their minds, what they're thinking is, well, you can win a war without firing a shot. You can win a war without burning bodies or causing deaths. You would just drop a gas on them that makes them feel an intense amount of pain for 15 minutes. Then you move in, slap the cuffs on them, war's over. That's how they conceptualize it. So this can be seen as just the evolution of what they've been doing since the fucking 50s, right? But now they're specifically targeting the mind and our mental faculties. And again, this is like MK Ultra stuff, but the next thing.
For the past 100 years, neuroscientists have approached the brain like mapmakers, charting its features and activities within well-defined boundaries. The prefrontal cortex is celebrated as the seat of rationality. The motor cortex plans and coordinates movement. The somatosensory cortex and parietal lobes control our perception of the physical world. The temporal lobes process memories, language, and emotion. The occipital lobe processes and integrates visual information, and the cerebellum helps execute our body's motor commands.
The book opens, and there's several authors in this book. Each chapter is a different essay, but I'm going to kind of blend them together and discuss some talking points. Because I think people need to, when they're thinking about the shape of war that's coming at them will take, people talk about psyops, but they also talk about psyops in a very 20th century sort of way. They talk about psyops like, a spook trying to, trick you. It's like, no, like you got to think more broadly about the ways your mind can be targeted. And we'll get into that now.
It's one thing to record the mind. It's another to modulate it. The idea of a combined system that can both read from and write to the brain or body is referred to as a closed-loop system or bidirectional human interface. This concept is truly profound, and it will define the next major revolution in computing technology. When you have products that not just are designed for the average user, but are designed to actually adapt to their user, that's something truly special. When we know what the data of an emotion or a feeling looks like, and we know how to make that data go up or down, then using AI, we can build constructive or destructive interference patterns to either amplify or suppress those emotions or feelings.
Here's how it opens up. It says, what they're trying to address here is, can neurotechnology resolve the problem of consciousness? And if so, what will be the implications of such findings for social thought and conduct? Will these technologies take us to the point of being beyond human? What values drive our use and potential misuse of neurotechnologies? How will neurotechnology affect the international balance of economic, societal, and political power? Should neurotechnology be employed by the military? And if so, how? Are there limits to neurotechnological research? And if so, what are they? Who shall decide? Things like that. So one of the things they try and get to in this book is, these are science guys, these are academics, and they're doing what they've always done throughout time, which is like, maybe if we get together and make a constitution or we make a code of ethics and make everyone sign it, then, like a nuclear non-proliferation treaty or something. So part of the book that they're trying to get at is like, if we convince people of the dangers of abusing neurotechnology, maybe we can set some rules. I'm not hopeful of that, but that's kind of the very secular, humanist, optimistic approach they're taking with this book. And the other thing here is it says brinksmanship deserves to be explored as the reality of neuroweapons emerges over the next decade. For example, prodding an opponent in subtle, invisible, and unverifiable ways has great strategic value. Brinksmanship arises when one contemplates the degrees to which danger, threat, and opportunity are potentially misperceived or understood. Can leaders really grasp their strategic options? So, really, what they're talking about, the real implications of neurological technologies is that everyone could possibly be being gaslit at all times. You'll never really know. And they'll give you some examples in the book that are really, really interesting. But one thing they say here, and this sets up the whole purpose of the book, he says, what is needed at present is the formulation and articulation of a cosmopolitan yet contextually receptive neuroethics framework. Good luck with that. He says, this type of neuroethics does not yet exist on a level that affords international relevance and application. Thus, it might represent a watershed development that could, number one, strategically enable transnational neuroscientific innovation, 2, remain cross-culturally sensitive, and 3, be instrumental to negotiating more stable economic relationships. So like all these guys are thinking that, with the dawn of us being able to fuck with our minds, and again, what they're talking about here is boosting your cognitive ability, making people smarter, suppressing emotions, making you into a computer, making a human into a computer, and what that could mean for negotiations. Like if you're an international leader, how do you behave if you are convinced that Joe Biden has had a brain chip put in? How do you approach that with someone who is more than human? We kind of assume that, that'll just be, people will be okay with that. It's like, no. That's going to mean every leader in the world, and then every business leader is going to have the same chip too.
And as we enhance and combine these technologies with machine intelligence, we envision powering new systems that are capable of augmenting our capabilities and increasing our productivity and health and well-being. For instance, we're currently working with the Human Spaceflight Laboratory at the University of North Dakota, as well as with NTL Group, Cognionics, and researchers from NASA, on research testing the feasibility of using wearable EEG sensors combined with specially designed cognitive assessment protocols to better characterize and predict changes in crew members' brain performance during simulated lunar or Martian missions. And if successful, technology like this could not only have useful applications here on Earth, but could also help to increase the safety and feasibility of long-duration deep space exploration.
So he says the things that neurotechnology seeks to address, like here are the main things, and when we talk about neurotechnology, here are the buckets that it kind of fits into. One is human cognitive performance. It says, through better understanding of basic processes involved with memory, emotion, and reasoning, including the formation of biases, such knowledge can provide improved task design, information structuring and presentation, and decision support to enhance human analysis. So almost like, getting brain chips or getting approved neurological chemicals to make it so you could like read faster. So if you're like a government analyst, you could have like certain implants or certain augmentations that make it so you could actually just read and process data faster, or most interesting, like they go to the point of like, if you have enhanced cognitive abilities, you could actually create presentations to each other that are way, way more detailed that regular people can't even understand. So it's almost like increased human cognition as a form of encryption. That's I never really thought of it like that. I'm like, that's like, if you think of it like a government would in the terms of like PowerPoint presentations and phone calls, like I guess, yeah, this would be like a whole new thing. Another one is training efficiency. And so they can use the technology to enable rapid mastery of knowledge and skills with longer retention times through individualized real-time tailoring of instructional material. Medical treatment and rehabilitation is another. Providing more rapid and complete recovery from injury and enhanced resilience to stresses and hazards of military operations. Now, this is an interesting, I'll just take a bit of a detour here and say a big thing that they're trying to resolve with neurotechnology is addressing PTSD and basically making it so soldiers and people who are exposed, like here's the thing, like people talk about PTSD in terms of horrible things that one might do during war. Horrible things they might see during war. Of course, that exists. They're just starting to wrap their minds around the PTSD that may emerge, maybe at a lesser level, but similar when you're exposed to really horrific information. And we discussed this a while ago about how a lot of these social media platforms, Meta especially, and TikTok would be another, they don't really have good algorithms. People like to gesture to the idea of like, oh, it's the algorithm that served me the content. It's the algorithm. They don't really have good algorithms. Certainly not algorithms to detect offensive content or illegal content. They don't really have an algorithm to detect child pornography or gore. How they detect that is that, you report it when you see it, and individuals have to comb through all those reports. So 9 times out of 10, if the child pornography is not on the platform, it's because real people found it, verified it with their own eyes, categorized it as such, and removed it. And maybe one day they get AI or machine learning to do that. Or instead of developing masterful AI, they just enhance the human actors to where like enhancing a human mind with cybernetics might solve a lot of the problems that you can't get to with an AI. So you could still have fewer people doing it, but their cognitive abilities will be boosted. However, that just means they're looking at far, far more soul-breaking content every day. So the other thing they're trying to figure out is, okay, how can we make people deal with these horrific things? Because I think there's an argument to be made that in an information war, if information is weaponized, you can be exposed to information on a screen that is meant to damage your mind. It is designed to traumatize you in some way. And maybe there's some kind of trippy, futuristic cyberpunk image that's designed to like drive you insane. So you actually need to have minds that are made to be made impervious to PTSD, but that is fundamentally like making the mind non-emotional. But that's one thing they're trying to develop with neurotechnology. It's like, how can we actually suppress emotions? At the end of the day, that's what they're talking about, either through chemicals or through implants or whatever it might be. So that's what they're talking about with all this. It's got a note here. It says, as noted in a 2008 report conducted by the Ad Hoc Committee on Military and Intelligence Methodology for Emergent Neurophysiological and Cognitive Neuroscience Research, Gesundheit, in the next 2 decades, for good or for ill will, an ability to better understand the capabilities of the body and the brain will require new research that can be exploited for gathering intelligence, military operations, information management, public safety, and forensics. So the other thing that they're trying to develop with this is like they're going to tailor this to like spying on individuals as well, because the more they understand how to manipulate emotions on the military side, the more they can actually manipulate emotions on the societal side. You know what I mean? So like when you talk about neurological weapons, like that's deployed not only against an enemy, they're already talking about how they could deploy it to, let's say, put down civil unrest. Let's say put down dissident movement. You know, anything that is, you know, unproductive, as they might call it. And anything is possible because they don't see this as doing harm. Not really. It's just neutralizing. And it's got one right here. One of the questions they ask is, can these technologies and tools be used to, 1, describe and perhaps predict biophysiological factors of group violence, 2, provide putative targets for multidisciplinary intervention to deter or mitigate aggression and violence, and 3, if so, in what ways and to what extent can these be utilized for the general public? So again, like the other thing I want to just remind people, like, think of this book as like the policymakers talking to each other. This isn't a conspiracy book made for, you know, popular culture. This is something you would see, like this is what the people at the higher levels are actually talking about. And that's why it's phrased not in a poetic or sensationalist way. Like you have to kind of read between the lines of this book and really pull the specific quotes where they get specific. Because oftentimes it's like, you know, we want to be fair, we want to be good, we want to be, you know, good people, but however, let's be aware that China's doing this and we need to figure out how to put down civil unrest just as well as they can. Like that's what they like fucking say. And he makes a part about how the technology develops that makes this relevant is described right here. And he says, all Department of Defense transition programs are designed to shepherd new products into acquisition programs, or they are purchased for operational use. So he's kind of describing how the government and the State Department develops these technologies, kind of like the internet. How the internet was originally designed was it's designed by the government and it's kind of cascading through different sort of government institutions before it's finally released to the public. And they make a point in the book that's interesting. They said that, you know, in the past, what we used to do was, you know, we would develop this with the government and then we would kind of release it to the public. And they said, but as the decades have gone on, that process has gone closer together. And the example they give was like, you know, we were developing drone technology the exact same time private companies were developing drone technology. Like by the time like the final good drones were ready for use by the military, they were already kind of being released to the public as well. And so there was no like secret development. And so they're like, you know, any development of neurotechnology right now, it's almost going to be happening in parallel with the rest of the public. And that's one of the reasons they're writing this book, which is like, we can't keep a handle on this anymore. And this is the AI thing I was talking about just now. What they would love is for this to be designed by governments, but we don't exist in a world where that can even be done anymore. They've already understood that anything to do with neurotechnology or AI, it's almost being developed in full public view. So it's not anything that sounds like a leak. It's probably not a leak. It's probably, this is just the framework that they're living in right now. But then you have to think like, okay, so what do they know that we don't? Because they want us to know certain things, but not know other certain things. Anyway. And one of the reasons they're developing this technology and they have an interest in this, I never heard it phrased like this before, is that while the technological capabilities for collecting, processing, displaying, and disseminating information have dramatically increased over the past several decades, human information processing capabilities have not increased in the same manner. These limitations of human cognitive capabilities will have obvious and significant consequences for performance in the face of an increasingly complex and information-intensive operational environment. So, just to relate that to something that people might be more familiar with, when you hear of a competency crisis, when you hear about declining IQ, when you hear about how, like, basically what he's saying is like our technology's gone better. There's more data than ever before, but we haven't actually gotten smarter enough to process it, and we're hitting a wall where the amount of data that we're given, we don't know what to do with because we can't read fast enough, and maybe we're even getting stupider. So consider that. Because people will talk about the competency crisis, like what happens when the IQ really drops? What happens when the dysgenic biomass takes over? It's like, well, what they have here is a pathway to have a permanent upper class of the cognitively capable. It's just it won't be done through genetics, it won't be done through education and IQ. It'll probably be done through technology, because it turns out you can just get enough chemicals or technology to boost whatever it is you need them to do. So this is really just the ramping up of specialization. So if you have someone with a high IQ and a high G for general intelligence, you could kind of put them wherever you want. But maybe if you have a dumb person, but you can make them read fast enough, that's good enough. And you can just put them over here where your job is just reading, and we'll boost this person over here if their job is interpreting this one type of data. So you just it's like the Industrial Revolution, but for cognitive capabilities, and creating like an assembly line where you can plug in fucking retards to do this. So it wouldn't even matter if people are getting stupider or more high or more, drugged out and depressed, because the people who need to be computers will be made computers. And then the people who are getting a bit too uppity can be put down with that same technology. Now, what do you think about that? Does that sound a bit too grandiose?
Nope. It's going to happen, and we need to stop it.
Yeah, he frames it another way here. He says, as information technologies have proliferated over the past several decades, it has become widely believed that information and its use on the battlefield is vital to the success of our armed forces. The use of information dominance is critical to military dominance. A more recent elaboration on the concept of information dominance is the notion of decision superiority, the process of making decisions better and faster than your adversaries. And that's kind of what we're talking about right here. So it's not only your ability to act more competently, but to act fast. And maybe it's shaving off milliseconds of your reaction time. And prior to this, maybe you accomplished that with amphetamines on the battlefield, or cocaine, or whatever fucking LSD they're experimenting with. But this would just be a more advanced way to do that. And one of the things, from a scientific point of view, I can explain the biology of what they're trying to handle, because it's not this sort of abstract mindscape they're trying to do. So he talks about this thing called interoception. Interoception comprises receiving, processing, and integrating body-relevant signals together with external stimuli to affect motivated behavior. So this framework comprises peripheral receptors, the C fibers, the spinothalamic projections, all these parts of the brain that are specifically designed to interpret data and kind of translate that to what your body wants. For example, a person will approach a heat source in a cold environment, but avoid it when the ambient temperature is high. Because what it does, let's see here. Interoception is an important process for optimal performance because it links the perturbation of the internal state as a result of external demands to a goal-directed action. So really what they're trying to do, all that is to say that they can actually just, if you think of it like a mechanism or the human mind like an operating system, all they're trying to do is amplify that and heighten that. So it's not even like you need to think of this like casting a spell on your mind. It's like, no, we can just hijack this one mental process that everyone has and ramp that up so high that everyone's just highly, highly sensitive to minute changes and things. And that's really all you need to do. And you can do that to help someone on your side, or you can weaponize that to make your opponent like more confused and like walk into walls and shit like that. And here's this really interesting part that I was thinking about today, because when we think of, you know, the military mind, we think of the type of person who you want involved in these sorts of military exercises. You're probably thinking of a cold, analytical, maybe even a cynical mind, like a battle-hardened guy. But they make a case that actually what you want is this like almost like naive, optimistic person. So what he says here is that he says resilient individuals are able to generate positive emotions to help them cope with extreme situations. According to the broaden and build theory, positive emotions facilitate enduring personal resources and broaden one's momentary thought of action repertoire. We suggest that individuals that score high on self-reported resilience may be more likely to engage the insular cortex while processing salient information. This positive bias during emotion perception may provide the rose-colored glasses that resilient individuals use to interpret the world and achieve effective ways to bounce back from adversity and maintain wellness. So in short, what they're saying there is that a lot of like naive, optimistic people might have a better chance of surviving high stress or traumatic situations. So consider that. Consider how they might tilt towards finding like dumb, naive people to do these operations, or to hijack people's mental processes to make them feel good more often, just as a way to like blunt force them through getting through adversity. It's just a funny way of looking at it. Like maybe you actually want dumber people to do these things, which would stand to reason, right? Like how, like if you have a very, very low IQ, is it easier for you to commit murder? You know what I mean? Like if you don't understand things. Anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
And he gives a couple examples here. The Mind's Eye program, the MEP, at DARPA is already attempting to build a smart camera with machine-based visual intelligence capable of learning generally applicable and generative representation of action between objects in a scene. Basically, it's like an artificial intelligence merged with an eye. And they also have DARPA as a machine reading program that seeks to replace expert and associated knowledge engineers with unsupervised or self-supervised learning systems that can read natural text and insert it into AI knowledge databases. Basically scan everything that's submitted or everything that's available and kind of scan it for emotional, trigger words, or to try and discern like when someone's writing something, are they tense, are they upset, and then kind of figure out if this is like a problem individual, and doing that also with a camera too. And he says a considerably more imposing possibility is to, quote, change minds and hearts by altering the will or capacity to fight through neuropharmacologic or neuromicrobiological and or neurotoxic agents that, one, mitigate aggression and foster cognitions and emotions of passivity, two, incur morbidity, disability, or suffering as a way to neutralize the opponents, or three, induce more mortality. James Hughes has identified 6 domains of neurocognitive function that can currently be pharmacologically manipulated, and these are memory, learning, and cognitive speed. That's 1. 2, alertness and impulse control. 3, mood and anxiety. 4, creativity. 5, trust, empathy, and decision making. And 6, walking and sleeping. So they got these broken down into buckets, and they say we could neurologically target each and every single one of these with like a specified toxin if we wanted to. And he says here, even MDMA and LSD as neurotoxins that could be deployed to neutralize an opponent, the distribution of a neurotropic drug or neuropathological agent throughout a population could create a societal burden that significantly impacts the means, economic resources, and or motivations to fight. But there's also the risk of a number of quote-unquote spillover effects. So basically, like right here, they are literally hypothesizing like what we were talking about with China. Like you could introduce drugs in the population, and that, not to say that they would cause a riot, but they would, You're trying to make the people into an economic burden. And I've never heard it phrased like that before. I'd always consider like, oh, you would poison a population to make them turn against their government or kind of act crazy. It's like, no, you just want them to be a problem for the government. And that's enough. If you do that to an entire population, if you make the entire population like 1% sicker, that's COVID. You want to talk COVID? You want to talk about what COVID was and what it could have been? Making an entire country just get the flu when you want. It's done. You ended the world for 2 years when that got out of control, didn't you? So just imagine that. Imagine COVID, but they never fucking stop. And COVID is just a regular disease, right? That was just the flu, right? But imagine if it's just like something that triggers anxiety, something that makes more people commit suicide or not want to go into work. You know, you can do that stuff really easy, and you won't really be able to know where it came from. Is the idea? Yeah, and this is even amplified by what they call the dual use problem. So the dual use problem they call is the risk that scientific or technological innovations created for legitimate civilian or defensive military purposes can be diverted to malicious purposes. He says what we address here is the opposite problem. We've coined the term reverse dual use. It occurs when technological development for legitimate military objectives is spread to the civilian sector to have a largely unanticipated or disruptive effects. So he's basically saying, like, once the lid is off this and this is introduced to the public, which it will be because all these developments are happening in tandem with the public right now, it's like there's no way to get a lid on this. There's actually that's why they're coming up with a code of ethics, because they're like, there's no tariff, there's no treaty, there's no stipulation or law you can make to put this genie back in the bottle. There's already people right now experimenting with like mind altering bullshit. He says what would take decades to make its way into the mainstream in the early part of the century may take only a handful of years to reach the general society today. For example, UAV development by Honeywell with Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, funding was recently licensed to the Miami-Dade County Police almost simultaneously with its military debut. And here's kind of the big picture we're getting to. Neuroweaponry makes the global landscape a potential level playing field. It is no longer an inherent strategic advantage to possess killer satellites, long-range missiles, laser weapons, and advanced weapons of mass destruction. If cognitions, emotions, and behaviors can be accessed and channeled towards outcomes, the global battle space will be dramatically altered, and in light of this, it will be necessary to design and implement systems to protect humans from neural interference. They even like hypothesize another few examples here. Now, I don't know how realistic these are. I just wanted to go through them to kind of tickle the conspiracy mind of people. One example is a psychotropic generator, they said these are kind of examples that were tested out in the mid-20th century that I think work, but were never really rolled out. But I'm just going to say them what they are. A psychotropic generator, which produced a powerful electromagnetic probe capable of being sent through telephone lines, TV and radio networks, supply pipes, and incandescent lamps. An autonomous generator device that operated in the 10 to 150 hertz band, which at the 10 to 20 hertz band formed an infrasonic oscillation destructive to living creatures. A nervous system generator designed to paralyze the central nervous systems of insects, which, upon further development, could exert similar effects on humans. Ultrasound pulses, which were supposedly capable of affecting bloodless internal manifestations without leaving external evidence. So let me just say that ultrasound, like pulses that would be capable of affecting bloodless internal manifestations without, like, I don't know what that means, internal manifestations, but it sounds like it's giving you a tumor with sound. And this is stuff they've tested in the past. This is an interesting one. I don't know if this was tested, but it's called the 25th frame effect, where in each 25th frame of a movie, reel, or film footage contained a message that would incur subconscious effects on cognition, emotions, and or behavior. This technique was advocated to curb smoking and alcoholism, but was also noted to possess wider applications if applied to it on a TV or movie audience or a computer operator. If one posits a battle space similar to the cyber warfare domain, where does it originate and how can forensic science find, determine, and pinpoint the attacker? That's the question. So if these things are employed, you don't know where the fuck it came from. None of these leave traces. Like even with a computer virus, oftentimes you can find out where it came from. This is just it's released and everyone has plausible deniability. And one, I know we gotta get going soon, but there's one thing they talk about here because they're trying to take the very sort of, again, secular, liberal, humanist approach where they said an extremely effective diagnostic tool, such as the hypothetical use of brain scanning technology, could actually lead to an increased rights violations rather than a decrease. How might this be possible? By providing the Department of Defense and the DHS with an extremely effective tool to measure veracity or tell when someone's lying, they could overcome one of the most significant barriers to the use of torture in interrogation settings. I never thought of that before, but because consider this: the reason you don't use torture, or the main reason that you're given, is that it's not effective. People will give you the wrong information, right? Now, what if you could torture and also hook them up to a brain scan device? All you need is a more advanced lie detector. But lie detectors don't work. Like the lie detector machines that we have currently, everyone kind of knows they don't work. They're not even admissible as evidence anymore. However, if you actually did have a foolproof lie detector, that means you actually could more effectively employ torture, because all you need to do is tell when they're lying, right? then you could actually waterboard. That's pretty much what he's saying there. And I mean, that is true, because now torture makes sense, right? And how would they actually do that? Like, what would that technology look like? He cites fMRI gauges. So an fMRI, it's an fMRI machine. The fMRI gauges brain activity by measuring blood oxidation levels in the brain of a subject. These data are then often displayed as an activation map, or a three-dimensional representation of the brain with the increased blood oxidation levels. By measuring an increase in oxygen, this technology is able to measure which parts of the brain are more active at any given time. So by using this, these companies claim they are able to determine when an individual is lying by observing the blood oxidation in the brain. So that would be the lie detector test, a three-dimensional image of the brain to tell when someone's lying. And anyway, he ends with this. He ends with like the pledge. This pledge calls on neuroscientists to follow the basic ethical principles of recognizing the consequences of their actions, taking responsibility for those consequences, and obeying the law. The pledge fits well within the broader framework of critical neuroscience. They're just trying to
Thanks, Sam Altman.
Yeah. We got the lessons from history concerning the relationship between science and the military are as follows. It is an amalgam of successes and failures. There is nothing totally unique about neuroscience and technology, and there are legitimate concerns. Based on these lessons, I recommend active education, because there actually is no way to regulate this. He's saying, at best, we could hope for weak regulation. But what they're at right now is like,
not with that attitude.
Yeah. Like, well, really, like, it makes sense that, like, once the idea that if people want to talk about, fourth or fifth generational warfare, about the blurring of the lines between combatants and non-combatants, this completely removes any line between combatants and non-combatants. Like, all human minds on the world are, if not opponents, then targets to be employed. And if they're convinced
a permanent state of total war.
Yeah. Because they redefine what war is. It's like, what's on war? It's not bullets. It's not fire. It's just, causing pain in the short term to get what we want. You see, but this is why I bring this up. This is why I want people to think of this when they hear about AI, and when they look at these AI companies, and they seem to be working in concert with other AI companies and also the governments and also foreign investors, because they've accepted that this monster is inevitable, and everyone's kind of just trying to keep pace with it, it seems. But then also that they are asking the types of questions that conspiracy theorists would salivate over. And like, these are problems they're thinking about. It's like, well, of course we're going to need to fuck with people's minds. Like, forget psyops. Your conceptualization of what a psyop is is 20th century. What you think of a psyop is old hat. You need to get on board with what the psyops are gonna be. And that's what I'm hoping to bring up here. Like, it is, you bifurcate it into the stuff that's for your people and the stuff that's weaponized against other people, and then think about how those can get tangled up and intertwined. How a citizen can be perceived as an enemy by its own country, how these chemicals can be introduced, and how the decline of IQ may be a feature and not a bug of this. And that's just my speculation. But all this is bound up together. Now, I know that was a bit of a loosey-goosey one, but what do you think about all that?
No, I mean, the thing with most of this is it's inevitable to the extent that we allow it to happen. The logic is sound. These are the steps that there's a strong motivation for people to take these steps. You know, if the weapon's on the table, somebody's going to reach for it. So it's Pandora's box. And then the question isn't, is this possible? The question is, how long is it going to take? Who's going to get it first? And how do we stop it? And I am laughing at the idea of him saying, well, you can't stop it, so we may as well embrace it and educate and regulate. No, you can stop it. You can. Look, I'm not saying you should. You can go door to door with the automatic rifles and take everybody's computers and shut down all of the nuclear power stations around the entire planet. You could airburst bombs to create a nuclear winter and kill the population. You can do all kinds of things. You do all kinds of things that would prevent this. And I think living in a nuclear holocaust for 1,000 years would be preferable to this ever happening. This is essentially the end of humanity, but we all are walk around like fucking corpses, like permanent neurological slaves to some global government. Like, man, it's fucking nightmarish. And the way that he talks about this in such like plain, calm terms, like it's fucking Hellraiser, man.
And this is what academics do. They'll be like, well, of course, we're going to live in hell, but let's talk about what does hell mean? Who would, some people will live in hell. How Webster's defines hell as, you're the type of guy, and maybe we're all getting to this point where, you read the book Canticle for Leibowitz, that famous sci-fi book that takes place after what they call the Great Simplification, which is almost a black comedy event. I mean, black comedy isn't dark comedy, not like, the Nutty Professor. But like there was a global revolt against scientists and a global revolt against scientism and what they deemed smart people, because the scientists had caused sort of a nuclear war, a nuclear catastrophe. So they basically killed all the scientists and burned all the books. And so it takes place like 500 years in the future. And it's sort of this nuclear wasteland, but it takes the first third of that book takes place in a sort of anarcho-futuristic monastery where like they're trying to keep information alive, but they can't tell. Like they're trying to dig up old fucking coffee cups and books and shit and just kind of retranslate them and keep them alive. But it's like Fallout. Basically, it's like a Fallout book, but the characters are a bunch of monastic monks. And I'm like
I don't want to give up all modern technology, but I think that's a fair negotiating position until these people start talking like serious people. Until they start taking this seriously, because they're not fucking taking it seriously. Like they pay lip service to how dangerous it is, and then they keep walking forward. And well,
that's the acceleration thing where it's like we're walking forward, so I guess we have to run forward.
I guess we have to run. I mean, I don't want us. What I'm worried about is us just becoming. I mean the dissident right. 30 years from now, we're just the Republicans. We don't actually conserve anything. We don't save anything. We're just the grumpy guys who complain about what's happened to the world. Right? We need to take a stance that is opposite of what they're doing. So I don't mind taking the stance that actually shut it all down. Billions must die, and if you think that I'm crazy, give me an alternative and let's meet in the middle. But meeting in the middle right now, it shouldn't be meeting in the middle between their dystopia and today. No, I want to meet in the middle between 9th century serfdom and this. Let's find a middle ground between those two. Let's hash it out, okay? Because this is directly related to the whole fucking Sam Altman thing earlier. We still don't know what's happening. You and I have been hashing out this whole thing about AI and art. You and Geo and TLM and everybody too, over the past, 1 year, 12 months. 12 months ago, nobody'd heard of this shit. And now it's integrated. I was using it at work today. I was teaching the boomers in the office how we can use this. Like, it's moving too fast, man. It's moving too fast. Somebody has to pump the brakes.
And I really do think there's something to the Sam Altman fracas that has to do, like, I believe the rumors that there's that factionalism within this movement where people are, it's between slow down and speed up and almost like it's inevitable. So we might as well go as fast as possible to outpace each other, I guess.
Do not let the rapists win. Listen and love Blood Satellite.